They said she was a miracle, some said a curse. In the quiet hills of the 1915 Missouri Ozarks, a young girl named Clara Caldwell began to dream in symbols no one could read and speak of worlds no one could see. Science called her a mystery, faith called her a warning, but perhaps she was something far greater, a window into the hidden chambers of the human soul. In the quiet expanse of the Missouri Ozarks in 1915, the world seemed untouched by the speed and noise of progress. Life there followed the rhythm of the land, where dawn was marked by the cry of a rooster and night fell heavy with the hum of crickets. It was in this landscape of humble stillness that Clara Caldwell was born, a girl who seemed to arrive not as a child of her parents, but as a question posed to the universe itself. Her birth was unremarkable in every earthly sense. No storms raged that night, no strange lights appeared in the sky. But the older women of the town swore the air felt unusually heavy, as if the world paused to take notice of her first breath. Clara's parents were ordinary folk, her father a lumber worker, and her mother a midwife who had delivered most of the town's children. They expected a simple life for their daughter, one defined by chores, church, and community, as all lives were in that corner of the world. Yet from her earliest years, Clara's gaze unsettled those who met it. There was something in her eyes, a stillness, a depth that made even the most talkative fall silent. When she was 4, she began to speak in ways no one could explain. She would trace symbols in the dirt behind the house, whispering softly to herself, forming patterns that resembled constellations, though she had never seen a map of the heavens. Her father once found her awake in the middle of the night, staring out the window, murmuring the names of stars that no one had taught her. By 7, she could describe the anatomy of a bird with unsettling accuracy, and she once corrected the town doctor when he misnamed a bone. These small acts began as curiosities, but soon turned into a local legend. The people of the Ozarks, deeply bound to their faith, saw the world in terms of miracles and curses. When something defied explanation, it wasn't studied. It was feared or worshipped. Clara became both. The schoolteacher, a patient woman from St. Louis, tried to find reason in Clara's brilliance. She tested her, asked her to read, to write, to explain how she knew what she knew. Clara did not hesitate or boast. She simply answered with the calm of someone who had already seen the question and its answer long ago. When asked how she understood such things, she replied that it just comes, as though knowledge itself flowed through her like wind through the trees. The teacher reported that Clara had once solved a geometry problem no child should have been able to comprehend, not with the mechanical precision of memorization, but with the intuitive grace of someone who saw the truth before calculation. The townspeople began to call her the genius girl, though many did so with unease rather than admiration. Science at that time had begun to stretch its reach, and the newspapers carried stories of strange minds and gifted children. But Clara's case stood apart. Her brilliance did not emerge from books or instruments or laboratories. It was born from silence, from the soil of a simple life. Those who tried to study her found themselves troubled, not by what she knew, but by what she seemed to awaken in them. One professor from Springfield, after visiting her, confessed to her parents that speaking to Clara felt like standing before a mirror that shows not your face but your soul. He left the Ozarks unsettled, muttering that her knowledge seemed older than her body, older even than language. Clara's mother, a gentle woman of faith, feared for her child. She saw how the people whispered, how some crossed themselves when Clara passed, and how others watched her with the suspicion once reserved for witches. Yet Clara remained untouched by their fear. She was neither proud nor defensive. She seemed to move through life as if guided by an unseen order, her actions quiet but purposeful. When she spoke of the stars, she did so with reverence. When she tended to sick animals, she whispered words that sounded like prayers. To her, there was no difference between knowledge and devotion. Her father, a practical man, sought explanations in the ordinary. He searched for hidden books, for a neighbor who might have taught her secretly, but found nothing. There were nights when he would sit by the fire, staring at Clara as she sketched strange shapes on scraps of wood, feeling both pride and unease. Once he asked her directly, "How do you know these things, Clara?" She looked up from her drawings and simply said, "Because they remember me." The words chilled him to his core, for they did not sound like a child's imagination. They carried the weight of something timeless, as if memory itself had taken form within her. As Clara grew, her genius became both her gift and her curse. The more she revealed, the more the town withdrew. Some believed she was touched by heaven, others whispered that she had been marked by something else. The pastor warned against the pride of knowledge, preaching that not all wisdom came from God. Yet Clara never argued. When he confronted her, saying that human minds were not meant to hold the mysteries of creation, she smiled softly and replied, "Then perhaps it isn't mine to hold." In that answer, she revealed a truth that neither science nor faith could bear, that knowledge, when pure, does not belong to the knower. By her teenage years, Clara's name had reached beyond the Ozarks. Scholars, doctors, and journalists came to observe her, taking notes, asking questions, probing her mind for the secret of her brilliance. But every test failed to capture her essence. She would answer their inquiries, then ask them questions of her own, questions that turned their scientific curiosity into quiet introspection. One scholar later wrote that he left the interview feeling as though she had studied me. Clara's genius did not merely challenge the intellect, it unsettled the soul. In the heart of the Ozarks, she stood as a contradiction to everything the modern world believed about intelligence, progress, and reason. Her existence blurred the line between the rational and the mystical, reminding all who met her that human understanding was but a candle flickering in an ocean of shadow. The mystery of her mind could not be dissected, for it did not belong to the realm of flesh or neurons. It belonged to something far older, something the people of her time could only describe with awe or fear. Thus, in a place defined by simplicity, a paradox was born. A child whose silence spoke more than the sermons of men, and whose knowing reminded the world that the greatest mysteries do not rise from the universities of the world, but from the unseen depths of the human spirit. Clara Caldwell was not merely a prodigy of the Ozarks. She was a living question, the embodiment of what lies beyond explanation, the echo of a truth the world had long forgotten. In the small, isolated communities of the early 20th century Ozarks, belief and fear were often the same language spoken with different tones. When Clara Caldwell began to exhibit signs of brilliance no one could explain, that language shifted uneasily from wonder to suspicion. Her mind, so luminous and unpredictable, became a mirror held up to those around her, reflecting their secret thoughts about the nature of intelligence, divinity, and madness. What people could not name, they projected. What they could not understand, they judged. Clara's mind became not only her own, but also the stage upon which the collective fears of her time began to play out. Every small town carries its own shadow, a shared undercurrent of superstition and repression that hides beneath politeness. In 1915, Missouri, that shadow was thick with mistrust of what defied religion or social order, and Clara unknowingly drew it to the surface. As word of her abilities spread, strangers began to visit, clergy, educators, and even self-proclaimed healers, each seeking to make sense of her. Some claimed her knowledge came from God, others that it was a trick of the devil, and a few whispered that she must have been born under some celestial misalignment. The more people debated her origin, the less they saw her humanity. She was no longer a girl, but a symbol upon which everyone projected their own beliefs. The women who envied her intelligence called her unnatural. The men who feared her independence dismissed her as fragile and in need of guidance. The devout said she was a prophet. The skeptics said she was mad. Yet Clara herself seemed untouched by their interpretations. She spoke with quiet calm, as though she knew that the storm swirling around her had little to do with who she was and everything to do with what she revealed in others. The more she displayed her knowledge, the more the people's reactions grew polarized. When she corrected a visiting preacher about a verse he had misquoted in Greek, the congregation fell silent. Some gasped, others crossed themselves, and one old woman whispered that the devil spoke ancient tongues. The next day, a few townsfolk refused to make eye contact with her, yet others came secretly to her home at night, asking her to interpret dreams, to explain illnesses, to describe things she could not possibly know. In those encounters, Clara saw something she could never speak of aloud: the hidden longing within each person to touch the mystery they feared. Every human being carries within them an unacknowledged yearning for transcendence, and when Clara's mind seemed to breach that boundary, it forced them to face that yearning. The doctors who studied her from St. Louis and Springfield brought their instruments and notebooks, hoping to categorize her within the growing framework of psychology and neurology. They tested her memory, her reaction time, her perception of patterns. They asked her to explain how she solved problems without formal education, but her answers only deepened the mystery. She told them she didn't think in words, but in shapes, colors, and sensations that turned into meaning. When they pressed for more, she said quietly, "The world speaks to me in pictures." For these men of science, her statement was infuriatingly poetic because it violated the boundaries of rational explanation. One of them later remarked that the girl's intellect seems to draw from a well beneath the human mind. Their instruments could measure her reflexes, but not the origin of her understanding. They came to dissect her mind, but instead found themselves staring into something that felt larger than the human frame. As they left, they whispered among themselves that perhaps she had a rare form of inherited genius or even a mental anomaly. But in truth, they left disturbed. She had forced them to confront the possibility that human consciousness might not be fully contained within biology. Her existence suggested that the mind could access something older, deeper, a collective inheritance of memory and wisdom beyond the individual self. Though no one had words for it at the time, Clara embodied the shadow of that collective awareness. In her, people saw both the potential and the danger of the unknown within themselves. The townspeople, too, began to divide in subtle ways. Some came to worship her, believing she was a messenger, while others grew increasingly hostile, accusing her of witchcraft or deception. The church elders called for her to be examined by a priest, fearing that the devil might use her as a vessel to confuse the faithful. The irony was that in their attempt to defend faith, they revealed their own doubt. Clara had not spoken against God, yet her very existence made them question the boundaries of divine creation. It wasn't that she denied their beliefs, it was that she transcended them. Her wisdom seemed neither holy nor blasphemous. It simply was. At night, when the world grew quiet, Clara would sit by her window and listen to the whispers that drifted through the dark. She knew what they said about her, but she also knew something deeper, that their fear was not of her, but of themselves. She sensed the strange paradox of human nature, that people crave enlightenment but dread its cost. She saw that every soul carries a duality, the longing to know and the terror of what might be revealed. She represented that inner conflict to the community, and so they both sought her and shunned her. She became the embodiment of their collective shadow, the truth they were unwilling to confront. The more they feared her, the more she withdrew. In her isolation, she began to sense the sadness of the human condition, the way ignorance often disguises itself as faith, and how fear wears the mask of morality. Her brilliance became her solitude, for no one could truly meet her where she stood. The people wanted her light, but not the reflection it cast upon their own darkness. And so, as seasons passed, the girl who once filled the town with wonder became a ghost within her own home, a silent reminder of the limits of human understanding. Years later, when scholars and psychologists would revisit the accounts of her life, they would interpret Clara Caldwell as a phenomenon of genius, a case study of unexplained intellect. Yet beneath their analysis lay a deeper truth. Her story was not about intelligence, but about the confrontation between the known and the unknown within the human spirit. She had revealed that knowledge itself is not the danger. The real danger lies in the mirror it holds up to humanity's collective shadow. Clara was not simply a mystery to science. She was a reflection of what every person carries but refuses to see, the vast, uncharted darkness beneath the surface of the rational mind, waiting to be named. When the scholars, doctors, and skeptics gathered around the frail figure of Clara Caldwell in that small Ozark farmhouse, they came expecting to observe an anomaly, a mind that could be measured, dissected, and placed neatly within the categories of intellect or illness. What they found instead was something that defied every framework they brought with them. Clara did not speak like a child gifted with precocious intelligence. She spoke with a cadence that felt ancient, deliberate, as though she were recalling something rather than inventing it. When she described how she came to know the things she knew, she never claimed to have studied or reasoned them out. She simply said that they were told to her, or that she heard them in dreams. That statement alone shattered the fragile order of logic those men had carried with them. For how could reason accept that wisdom might come not through thinking, but through dreaming, not through analysis, but through vision? These dreams meant, Clara often replied in metaphors. She said the lights spoke to her, not with words, but with understanding, and that every image carried layers of meaning that could unfold endlessly. The scholars tried to translate her symbolic speech into logic, but logic was too small to contain it. She once described a dream in which she stood beneath an enormous tree, its branches filled with eyes that blinked slowly, each reflecting a different part of the universe. When asked what the tree was, she smiled and said, "It's what we all grow from." To the scientists, her statement was nonsense. To those who listened with intuition rather than skepticism, it felt like the kind of truth that escapes language. Clara's dreams seemed to tap into something beyond her personal experience, a vast realm where knowledge was not learned but remembered, as if her mind were dipping into a collective ocean of memory. The more the doctors observed her, the more unsettled they became. One physician, after hearing her describe the structure of an atom in imagery that predated what science would later confirm, left her home pale and trembling. He confided to a colleague that he felt he had witnessed not a child's fantasy, but a revelation disguised as imagination. Her dreams appeared to function as a bridge between two worlds, the rational and the mystical, the conscious and the unconscious. She was a vessel through which the unknown spoke, yet Clara never seemed proud of it. If anything, she bore her gift with quiet fatigue, as though carrying knowledge that was too heavy for her small frame. She once told her mother that when she dreamed, it feels like walking through the mind of God, but the light burns. That line terrified her mother, who interpreted it as blasphemy, but Clara meant it not as defiance, but as awe. She understood that to glimpse truth without preparation was as dangerous as it was beautiful. In the community, her dreams became the source of both reverence and fear. Some villagers would ask her to dream for them, to find answers about lost loved ones, sickness, or the future. Others began to shun her, calling her visions unnatural, claiming that no good could come from a child who claimed to hear voices not of this world. Yet Clara herself seemed untroubled by their opinions. She knew that people feared what did not fit their understanding, but she also sensed that their disbelief was merely a wall built to protect them from the vastness they secretly longed for. For her, the voices in her dreams were not strangers. They were parts of something that belonged to everyone. When she described them, she often said, "They speak through me because no one else is listening." The physicians who returned for further study began to keep records of her speech patterns during sleep. They found no evidence of hysteria or delusion. Her heartbeat remained steady, her body temperature normal. What struck them most was the serenity in her tone when she spoke of impossible things. One doctor noted that the calm with which she describes the infinite is more frightening than hysteria would be. They could not decide whether they were witnessing a medical mystery or a metaphysical one. Their instruments could measure every pulse but could not touch the realm from which her knowledge seemed to flow. And in that realization, they confronted their own limitations, the boundary where reason ends and the ineffable begins. As Clara entered adolescence, her dreams deepened in intensity. She began to predict natural events, storms, floods, even illnesses that later occurred with eerie accuracy. When asked how she knew, she only said that the dreams had grown louder. Her parents grew frightened and sought help from both doctors and priests, but neither could offer peace. The doctors wanted to contain her. The priests wanted to silence her. Neither understood that her visions were not messages from above or below, but reflections from within, the voice of the unconscious that humanity had long forgotten how to hear. The more they tried to interpret her, the more they revealed about themselves. Her presence became a living symbol of humanity's refusal to accept that truth can emerge from mystery, that knowing may come not from calculation, but from surrender. In her later years, Clara began to write down fragments of her dreams in small journals. Each page contained symbols, circles within circles, spirals intersecting triangles, and fragments of sentences that read like riddles. When asked what they meant, she replied that she didn't yet know, only that someday they would make sense. She said that meaning comes not when we think, but when we remember. These words carried an ancient weight, the kind that unsettles even the wisest minds because they suggest that all discovery is in fact rediscovery, that the truth we seek has always been inside us, waiting to be awakened. Eventually, Clara's dreams began to consume her strength. She would wake trembling, exhausted, as if she had lived lifetimes during sleep. She told her mother that the voices were no longer content to whisper. They were singing, and their song was too vast to hold. When the scholars heard this, they dismissed it as delirium. But those who saw her in those final years said that when she spoke, her eyes seemed to look through people rather than at them, as though she had already begun to cross into the realm that had always called to her. Clara Caldwell's dreams were not madness. They were a dialogue between the human soul and the eternal unknown. Through her, something beyond reason found a voice, and in that voice, humanity was forced to remember the sacred truth it had long forgotten, that the deepest knowledge does not come from thought, but from the silence beneath it, where the infinite still whispers. In the rolling valleys of the Missouri Ozarks, where the church bell was the heartbeat of the community and scripture the measure of truth, Clara Caldwell's presence ignited a quiet war between two worlds, the world of faith and the world of understanding. The people who had known her since childhood, who had watched her walk barefoot through the fields and sit quietly in the back pews of Sunday service, could not reconcile what they saw with what they believed. a girl who spoke of the stars as though she had walked among them, who described the human body with divine reverence, who spoke truths that neither the Bible nor the scholars had taught her, stood at the very threshold where religion and reason collide. She was not openly rebellious, nor did she ever claim to challenge God, yet her very being posed the question that the faithful feared most. What if knowledge itself is a sacred language, and what if faith must evolve to understand it? To Clara, there was no separation between science and spirit. When she spoke about the anatomy of a flower, she did so with the same tone of reverence others reserved for prayer. To her, each petal, each vein, each pulse of life was evidence not of chaos, but of divine design. She once told her mother that God hides in the patterns of things. Those words rippled through the community, for they hinted at a theology that frightened the clergy, one where truth was not confined to the written word, but unfolded endlessly in the living world. The pastor of the local church, a stern man devoted to Scripture, began to preach against the arrogance of reason, warning that curiosity was the serpent's whisper in the garden. He did not name Clara directly, but everyone knew his sermons were meant for her. Still, she came to church each Sunday, quiet and respectful, her eyes fixed not on the pulpit, but on the stained glass window above it, where light poured through in shifting colors. When asked later what she thought during those sermons, she said softly, "He is talking about God's word, and I am listening to God's silence." That silence was what frightened people the most. Faith, for them, was certainty. Understanding was submission. But Clara's kind of knowing, her calm, wordless insight, was something else entirely. It was the kind of faith that does not depend on belief, but on experience, the kind that is born from direct communion with mystery rather than adherence to doctrine. In her presence, even the devout felt a stirring doubt, a whisper that perhaps the divine was far larger than they had been taught. She did not intend to threaten their beliefs, yet she did so simply by existing. Her mind operated not in opposition to faith, but beyond its boundaries, showing that enlightenment need not destroy devotion, but could transform it into something purer, deeper, and more whole. The tension came to a head one autumn evening when the church elders invited a traveling revivalist preacher to speak truth over the town. His sermons were fire and brimstone, the kind that reduced complexity to the simplicity of good and evil. During his visit, he insisted on meeting the so-called genius girl of the Ozarks, the child touched by the unknown. When Clara entered the small wooden church, the congregation fell into a tense silence. The preacher demanded she explain where her knowledge came from, his voice echoing through the rafters. Clara's reply was simple. "It comes from where yours does." The preacher's face darkened, and he accused her of blasphemy. He spoke of demons that disguise themselves as angels of light, of false prophets, of intellects used by darkness to deceive the faithful. But Clara's response was not anger, it was sorrow. She looked at him with eyes full of compassion and said, "If the light frightens you, it is only because you've forgotten it lives in you too." That moment divided the town forever. To some, Clara was a revelation, proof that the divine still spoke through chosen vessels, not through fire or thunder, but through the human mind. To others, she was a warning, a temptation dressed in innocence. They said her gift was pride, that she questioned God's design by seeking to understand it. But Clara never sought to replace faith with science. Instead, she sought to reunite them. She believed that truth in its highest form was one and indivisible, that what science called discovery was simply humanity uncovering the language of creation. When she spoke of the stars, she said they sang the same hymn as the church choir, only in a different key. Yet those who lived within rigid definitions of good and evil could not hear the harmony she described. Her closest companion during that time was an old teacher named Mrs. Alcott, who had once studied theology before devoting her life to education. She saw in Clara what others could not: the integration of faith and intellect, the balance between reverence and inquiry. One evening, as they walked by the river, Mrs. Alcott asked her if she believed in God. Clara smiled faintly and said, "I believe in everything that reminds me of Him." The answer was neither heresy nor conformity. It was transcendence. It expressed a relationship with the divine that was intimate yet infinite, grounded yet limitless. It terrified those who wanted clear lines between the sacred and the secular, between prayer and discovery, between heaven and earth. As years passed, the conflict within the community grew heavier. Some demanded that Clara renounce her unholy curiosity before being allowed to receive communion. Others began to treat her like a saint, asking her to bless their homes or pray for their sick children. Clara accepted both extremes with equal grace, though both wearied her. She knew that neither the worshippers nor the accusers truly saw her. They only saw their own fears and desires reflected through her. The priest once warned her that her wisdom without obedience would lead her astray. She replied gently that obedience without wisdom was another kind of blindness. Her words spread quietly, whispered among the young who had begun to question what their elders refused to confront. The tragedy of Clara Caldwell was not that she defied faith, but that she revealed its shadow. She showed that true faith is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to face it. That understanding does not weaken belief but gives it depth. Her life became a symbol of the sacred conflict that has haunted humanity for centuries, the struggle to unite the heart's devotion with the mind's curiosity. To the simple world of the Ozarks, she was too much light for comfort, too much truth for peace. But within that conflict lay the seed of awakening. Clara's existence whispered that the divine is not diminished by human understanding, it is completed by it. In her, faith and knowledge were not enemies, but reflections of the same eternal light, seen from different sides of the soul. By the time Clara Caldwell reached her late adolescence, her brilliance had ceased to feel like a gift. What had once been wonder and fascination for those around her had turned into isolation. Her mind, which had opened door after door into mysteries no one else could see, began to weigh heavily upon her spirit. She often sat by the window for hours, staring into the trees, her fingers tracing invisible symbols on the wooden sill. Those close to her began to notice that her gaze had changed. There was a distance in her eyes, not the absent look of madness, but the deep inwardness of someone who was beginning to see too much. Clara was descending, not into insanity, but into a part of herself that few ever dare to face. The place where light and darkness merge, where self and eternity dissolve into one another. It was a journey not of knowledge, but of confrontation, a descent into the unknown depths of her own being. She began speaking less and dreaming more. Her sleep became the stage of something vast and consuming. Some nights she woke trembling, covered in sweat, whispering that she had seen the roots of the world. Other nights she would rise silently from bed and write pages of strange symbols, circles within spirals, words written backward or intertwined, as though she was trying to capture something that refused to stay still. When asked about these writings, she would simply say, "They are not for now." Her parents worried, believing that the strain of her intellect had overwhelmed her body. Doctors from St. Louis examined her and declared her exhausted by excessive mental exertion. Yet Clara knew her struggle was not of the mind, but of the soul. She felt as though something deep within her was awakening, something ancient, something she both longed for and feared. The visions that had once brought her insight now began to haunt her. She saw flashes of cities submerged beneath water, faces of people she had never met but somehow remembered, languages she did not know she knew. She felt their emotions, their griefs, their triumphs, as if her consciousness had become porous, absorbing the echoes of other lives. She confided to her teacher, Mrs. Alcott, that she no longer felt separate from the world around her. "When I close my eyes," she said, "I am not myself anymore. I am everyone." The statement terrified the older woman, who thought it a sign of delusion, but Clara meant it literally. She was losing the boundaries of individuality, entering a state of unity that felt both divine and unbearable. It was as if the walls that separate the human mind from the infinite had begun to crumble, and she was standing at the edge of something vast and unending. In her moments of clarity, Clara tried to make sense of what was happening. She wrote in one of her journals, "To know everything is to carry the sorrow of all things." She seemed to understand that the gift she bore was also a curse, that awareness, when stretched beyond the human frame, becomes pain. The more she saw, the less she could return to ordinary life. Her friends from childhood, now young women themselves, visited her less often. They could not understand her silences, her sudden tears, or her distant gaze. They whispered that she was losing her mind, that her knowledge had broken her. But Clara was not breaking. She was transforming. She was crossing into the part of human consciousness that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. She had peered beyond the veil, and what she saw was both beautiful and unbearable. The townspeople grew uneasy again. Some claimed that her strange behavior was proof that her wisdom came from an unholy source. Others pitied her, saying she was a delicate soul consumed by her own mind. The pastor declared from the pulpit that knowledge without humility leads only to darkness, and urged her parents to keep her from indulging in her visions. But Clara had already gone too far inward for anyone to stop her. She no longer sought answers from books or men. Her struggle had turned inward, a battle between the expanding universe of her awareness and the fragile limits of her body. She began to write more feverishly, her notebooks filling with drawings that resembled maps of inner worlds, labyrinths, stairways, mirrors reflecting mirrors. In one entry she wrote, "There is a door beneath the self, and once it opens, it never closes again." Her health began to fail. She often refused food, saying that the dreams fed her. Her body grew frail, yet her presence remained powerful. Visitors who came to see her in those days described feeling an uncanny stillness in her room, as though time itself slowed in her presence. Some claimed to hear faint humming when she spoke, as if her voice carried more than sound. There were moments when her clarity returned, when she would smile and speak gently about the simplest things, the way the wind moved through trees, the rhythm of rain on the roof. But even in those moments, there was an otherworldly distance in her eyes, as if she was seeing through this world into another layered beneath it. Her descent reached its deepest point one winter night when she told her mother she had dreamed of standing before a vast mirror that reflected not her face, but countless others, men, women, children, old and young, from every time and place. She said they were all her, and she was all of them. The experience shattered her remaining sense of individuality. For days afterward, she could barely speak, her gaze distant, her voice reduced to whispers. The doctor declared it a nervous collapse, but Clara's final writings revealed something else. In one of her last journal entries, she wrote, "I have seen the shape of the soul, and it is not one thing, but everything woven together. We are not born to know, we are born to remember." Those words were her final articulation of the truth she had carried since childhood, the truth that the human mind, at its deepest, is a reflection of the entire universe, and that to awaken fully to that knowledge is both transcendence and torment. In her last months, Clara rarely left her bed. She spoke less of visions and more of peace. She told her mother that she no longer feared the darkness within, for she had learned it was not evil, but unrecognized light. She said that to descend into oneself is to meet both God and shadow, and that to deny either is to remain incomplete. The people of the Ozarks never understood this transformation. They saw her decline as punishment for pride, never realizing that what they witnessed was not destruction, but metamorphosis. Clara was dissolving into what she had always sensed, returning to the source of all she had glimpsed in dreams. Her death, when it came, was quiet. The night she passed, her mother said she saw a faint light flicker through the window, like a reflection of stars on water. They buried her on a hill overlooking the valley, where the wind carries the scent of pine and soil. Years later, her journals were found, filled with symbols, drawings, and words no one could fully interpret. To the scholars who studied them, she remained an enigma, a genius consumed by her own mind. But to those who sensed the spiritual depth beneath her suffering, she became something more. A symbol of the human soul's inevitable descent into itself. A reminder that true knowledge is not assent, but surrender. Clara Caldwell's life was the story of consciousness itself, its yearning to know, its terror of its own depths, and its ultimate return to the infinite silence from which it was born. Years after Clara Caldwell's passing, the Ozarks still whispered her name like a legend half-remembered. Her life had been short, her presence fleeting, yet something about her story refused to die. Children of the valley grew up hearing tales of the girl who knew the language of the stars, and travelers who came through her hometown often reported feeling an inexplicable calm when standing near her grave. But beyond folklore, beyond the superstition and fear that had surrounded her, there lay a deeper truth, a truth that science could not define, and yet one that would quietly influence generations to come. Clara's existence became a quiet testament to the mystery of the human mind, to the vast, uncharted landscape that lay beyond reason's reach. Her story lingered like the faint echo of a forgotten melody, one that the world was not yet ready to hear. In the years following her death, her notebooks and drawings became the subject of fascination for both scientists and philosophers who stumbled upon her work. What they found was bewildering, a web of symbols and ideas that seemed far ahead of her time. Many of her writings hinted at a deep understanding of psychology long before such terms existed in the rural Midwest. She described layers of the human self as if peeling back veils, writing that the mind is not a chamber, but a corridor of mirrors, each reflecting a different truth. Some of her diagrams bore uncanny resemblance to later scientific representations of neural networks and dream state mapping, concepts unknown in her era. Scholars debated how a young girl from the Ozarks, with limited education and no access to advanced study, could conceive ideas that would only be explored decades later. To some, it was evidence of genius, to others, madness. Yet to those who truly studied her work, Clara appeared as a vessel, someone through whom knowledge flowed, unbound by time or convention. There were even accounts from later generations claiming that researchers experienced strange phenomena while studying her notebooks. One scholar from Kansas City wrote that after spending weeks analyzing her symbols, he began dreaming of vast golden spirals and faces he did not know, similar to those Clara described in her journals. Another claimed that the more he tried to decode her words, the more he felt that the meaning shifted beneath his understanding, as though the text was alive. Such experiences blurred the boundary between rational study and mysticism, forcing many to confront an unsettling possibility that Clara's mind had touched something beyond the measurable, that her knowledge might not have been learned but remembered from somewhere deeper. Her writings defied translation because they were not merely intellectual, they were experiential, drawn from the unseen layers of consciousness that most people never access. Her hometown, once wary of her strange brilliance, slowly began to reframe her legacy. The Caldwell house, where she had spent her final years, became something of a local relic. The townsfolk began to tell her story not as a cautionary tale, but as a mystery of divine proportion. Old neighbors would speak of how the night she died, the wind stopped, and the sky shimmered faintly blue, as if the air itself paused to honor her passing. Over time, Clara became part of the region's mythic landscape, alongside tales of spirits, healers, and omens. Yet her legend differed in tone. It was not about fear or warning, but about awe. She was remembered as the girl who had seen too deeply, whose eyes had glimpsed what others refused to see. Her existence became a parable for the limits of knowledge and the danger of the soul's awakening in a world unprepared for such illumination. As the decades passed, her story began to surface in unexpected places. A university professor in the 1940s published an obscure article on her psychic intelligence, suggesting that Clara represented an early case of expanded consciousness. A psychologist in the 1960s referenced her visions as examples of the mind's capacity to access archetypal imagery, though he avoided the mystical language she herself had used. Even artists and poets found inspiration in her fragments, turning her symbols into abstract paintings and modern verse. To them, Clara embodied the eternal paradox of the seeker, the one who goes too far in search of truth and returns forever changed. Her legacy began to transcend the limitations of her own time and place, evolving into something larger than the girl herself, a symbol of the unexplainable depth within every human mind. But perhaps the most profound part of Clara's legacy was not the influence she had on others, but the question she left behind. Her life forced people to confront the uneasy relationship between reason and mystery. In a world driven by logic and proof, Clara stood as a reminder that not all truths can be measured. Her existence suggested that intelligence was not merely a function of learning, but an act of remembrance, a process of rediscovering the hidden language that connects all beings. She once wrote, "The mind is a door, and each question we ask is a knock, but few dare to open." That line, preserved in one of her journals, captures the essence of her philosophy. Knowledge was not accumulation, but awakening, not mastery, but surrender. The more one knows, the closer one comes to realizing that knowledge itself is only a shadow of something infinite. Her story also revealed the loneliness of such awareness. To see beyond the boundaries of the visible world is to be estranged from it. Clara's brilliance isolated her not because others feared her, but because they could not follow her. Her descent into the depths of her own consciousness showed the cost of illumination, the fragmentation of identity, the erosion of comfort, the dissolution of self. Yet through that disintegration, she seemed to touch a deeper unity, one that connected her to all living things. That was perhaps her greatest revelation, that the individual mind is not separate from the universe, but a reflection of it, a fragment of the same eternal consciousness seeking to know itself through form and memory. Even today, over a century later, Clara Caldwell's story continues to captivate those who encounter it. Psychologists who study creativity and altered states of consciousness cite her as an early case of transcendent cognition, a term describing minds that seem to operate beyond ordinary patterns. Mystics see her as a soul who briefly crossed the boundary between the human and the divine. Skeptics dismiss her as a brilliant but troubled young woman whose imagination overtook her reason. Yet none can fully explain her, and perhaps that is the essence of her legacy. She resists definition, as all truly profound mysteries do. Clara Caldwell remains, even now, what she always was, a mirror reflecting both the brilliance and the fragility of the human soul. Her life poses a question that humanity still struggles to answer. What happens when the boundaries of the mind dissolve? Does one fall into madness or awaken into truth? Clara's story suggests that perhaps both are the same path. that the descent into the unknown is not failure but fulfillment. To live as she did is to walk the edge between revelation and ruin, to carry within oneself the unbearable weight of knowing. And yet, through that burden, there is beauty. For Clara's legacy is not her intellect or her visions, but her courage, the courage to face the infinite within herself, to let go of certainty, and to become the mystery she sought to understand. Clara Caldwell's story is not merely the tale of a forgotten genius, it is a mirror held before humanity itself. Her life revealed that the boundaries between reason and revelation are far thinner than we wish to believe. She showed that the human mind, when freed from fear, can glimpse truths too vast for language, too sacred for proof. Clara was not broken by her visions, she was transformed by them. She became both the question and the answer, the seeker and the mystery sought. Though her voice has long faded into the Ozark winds, her legacy whispers still, that within every soul lies an unseen universe waiting to awaken, and that sometimes the price of knowing is the surrender of everything we thought we were.